This day and time. What happened today, years ago.
Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're taking on something, well, a bit different. We're looking at the surprising power of just one single date. July 1st. Now, you probably think, just another day on the calendar.
Right.
But our mission today is to sort of unpack how this date, July 1st, has been really pivotal across global history, reshaping nations, changing lives.
Yeah, we've gathered quite a few sources, historical accounts, geopolitical analysis.
And we're going to dig into them, find those connections, maybe across centuries, across continents. I think there might be some real aha moments here.
And that's really the key, isn't it? It's not just listing things that happened on July 1st.
No.
We want to get at the why. Understand the forces behind these moments, connect these seemingly separate events.
Right.
That gives you the broader context, makes the history feel, more relevant. It's about cause, effect, impact.
Exactly. So let's jump in. First stop, July 1st, 1863. Right. The American Civil War, summer of 63. Big armies moving. So why? What was the thinking behind the Confederate push, General Lee's push, way up into Pennsylvania?
Well, Lee had a pretty clear objective. He was aiming for a big, decisive win on Union soil.
Okay.
He hoped that would basically force the North to negotiate peace, and just as importantly, take some pressure off Vicksburg back down south, which was under siege.
A huge gamble then.
Definitely high stakes.
Oh, yeah.
He needed to shift the war's momentum.
But the way it actually started, the battle itself on July 1st, it wasn't exactly planned, was it?
Not at all. It's actually quite a story. The fighting kicked off almost by chance.
Awesome.
A Confederate brigade, they were heading into Gettysburg looking for supplies. Specifically, they needed shoes.
Shoes, serious?
Believe it or not, yes, shoes. And they ran smack into Union cavalry that had already arrived.
Wow.
So this Union cavalry commander, Brigadier General John Buford, he immediately saw how important the ground around Gettysburg was, especially the high ground to the south. And even though his men were outnumbered, they put up a heck of a fight, delaying the Confederates for most of the day.
So they bought crucial time.
Crucial time. Now, eventually, the Union forces did get pushed back right through the town itself, but, and this is key, they managed to hold on to that high ground south of town, Cemetery Hill, Cemetery Ridge.
Okay, so even though day one looked like a Confederate win on the ground,
Tactically, yes.
holding those hills was a critical outcome for the Union.
Absolutely. It set the stage for their defense over the next 2 days. It's really pretty amazing how an accidental encounter sparked by, a search for shoes ended up dictating the layout of such a decisive battle.
Yeah, it really shows how small things can have massive consequences in history.
Definitely.
Okay, so from a nation torn apart by war, let's shift gears. Let's move forward just 4 years, July 1st, 1867, and head north, Canada, a nation being formed.
A very different kind of July 1st event.
Totally different. So what was going on with the British colonies there? What made them want to, unite into a single federation?
Well, by the mid-1800s, they were facing several big challenges. For one, there was nervousness about the United States, especially after the Civil War. The potential for annexation or invasion.
Right, that makes sense.
And internally, they had issues too. Trade between the colonies was difficult, lots of barriers. Economically, it wasn't efficient. Plus, they needed a stronger central government to get big projects done, especially infrastructure like railways to connect everything. A unified approach seemed like the best solution.
So how did they make it happen?
Yeah?
It wasn't overnight, I imagine.
No, definitely not. It took a lot of talking, a lot of negotiation. Representatives from the main colonies, Canada, which is now Ontario and Quebec, plus New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, they held these important conferences.
Right, I've heard of those. Charlottetown, Quebec City.
Exactly. And London, too. They hammered out the details, the structure of the Federation, balancing powers. All that work led to the British North America Act.
And that was the legal foundation.
That was it. The British Parliament passed the act, and it officially took effect on July 1st, 1867. The Dominion of Canada was born.
And we should probably mention the key figures involved.
Okay.
Johnny MacDonald, of course.
Absolutely. Canada's first prime minister, really the driving force behind Confederation.
But others too, right?
Oh, yes. People like George Brown, Georges-Étienne Cartier from Quebec, Charles Tupper from Nova Scotia. They were all crucial players in the negotiations in actually building the framework.
So what was the long-term impact of that July 1st?
Huge. I mean, it's the birth certificate of modern Canada. It created a stable political system, allowed for westward expansion across the continent,
Okay.
spurred economic growth. It was the essential step towards Canada becoming the independent nation it is today, even though it remained part of the British Empire for a while longer.
It set the foundation.
Precisely.
And a little piece of trivia was called Dominion Day for a long time, wasn't it?
That's right. It only officially became Canada Day back in 1982, which sort of reflects Canada's own journey in defining its identity.
Interesting. Okay, let's jump way forward now. A much more recent July 1st, and one that many of us probably remember watching unfold live on TV. July 1st, 1997, the Hong Kong Handover.
A really significant geopolitical moment.
Definitely. So, remind us, how did Hong Kong end up under British rule for so long, and why that specific date for the handover?
Well, the key part, the new territories, which is most of Hong Kong's landmass, wasn't ceded forever like Hong Kong Island. It was leased by Britain from China back in 1898.
Ah, a lease.
Exactly. And that lease was for 99 years, so do the math.
Yeah.
It expired on July 1st, 1997. There was no getting around that date.
So the deadline was built in from the start, over a century before.
Pretty much, and that forced years of negotiations between the UK and China in the lead-up, culminating in the Sino-British Joint Declaration in 1984, which laid out the terms for the transfer of sovereignty.
And the handover itself, I remember the ceremony felt very symbolic, very choreographed.
Oh, absolutely. It happened right at midnight, June 30th, turning into July 1st, at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center. You had the lowering of the British flag, the Union Jack, and the Hong Kong colonial flag, and then immediately the raising of the Chinese national flag and the new Hong Kong Tsar flag.
And who are the key figures there?
Well, representing the UK, you had Prince Charles and the last governor, Chris Patten. And for China, President Jiang Zemin was there, along with Tung Chee-hwa, who became the first chief executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region.
And it happened exactly at midnight, right? Broadcast globally.
Precisely. 0.00000000000 Hong Kong time, July 1st. A very clear marker ending 156 years of British rule.
So what were the immediate and maybe the longer term implications?
Well, immediately it marked Hong Kong's return to China, but the really crucial part was the framework agreed upon. One country, two systems.
Right, that famous phrase.
Yeah. The idea was that Hong Kong would keep its own systems, its legal system, economy, social structures, a high degree of autonomy for at least 50 years after the handover.
An experiment, really.
A huge experiment. It raised and still raises big questions about sovereignty, identity, how different systems can coexist under one flag. It's a unique submission on the world stage, and its evolution is still very much ongoing.
So looking back across these three events, Gettysburg, Canadian Confederation, the Hong Kong handover, it's pretty striking how this one date, July 1st, pops up.
It really
A day of conflict beginning, a day of national birth, a day of complex geopolitical transfer.
And I think what these stories really highlight about history is, well, a couple things. First, how seemingly small details or accidents like needing shoes can have massive ripple effects.
Yeah.
Second, they show the very different ways nations come into being or change shape, sometimes through conflict, sometimes through negotiation, sometimes through the expiry of old agreements. And fundamentally, it just underscores how connected everything is, how the past shapes the present in ways we might not always realize. Understanding these moments gives you, I think, a richer view of the world.
It really does. So thinking about these three really different turning points, all falling on July 1st, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other dates out there might hold similarly unexpected, globally significant stories if we just, dug a little deeper?
That's a great question.
What does it tell you about how interconnected global events really are, even when they seem completely separate? Something to think about. Keep digging, keep connecting,
Absolutely.
and we'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.
Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more history daily.